Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Women Like Me Stories in Business. I'm actually very excited about having this conversation with Jaclyn Orent today. Let me first of all tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and then we're going to dive in. So, today's conversation is for the founders who've done everything right, but still feel the quiet ache that something's missing. My guest, Jaclyn Orent, works at the edge of modern leadership, where success alone is no longer the measure and aliveness becomes the new metric. We want to touch on that.
Yeah.
Jaclyn partners with visionary founders who have outgrown strategy, optimization, and hustle. Leaders who are effective, capable, and influential, yet quietly isolated. Together, we're talking about what happens when mastery is no longer the constraint, why leadership isolation erodes impact, and how founders can scale without losing their soul. So, this isn't just business advice, it's a reckoning and it's your invitation to be here with us. So, Jaclyn, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Well, what a wonderful introduction. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you and get to speak to your audience today.
Perfect. Well, why don't we just dive right in? We're going to start with our first question here. You use the term cultural catalyst.
Yes.
What defines the next era of founder identity and why is it essential now?
Yeah, so let's talk about the term cultural catalyst and let's just take a step back. Like, why are we even using the term cultural catalysts? It's very possible that people that are listening to this haven't even heard that until now, but it might spark something in them being like, wait a second, that's awesome. And there's actually a part of me that is totally a cultural catalyst. And um, that's actually been designed that way. So many years ago, I left sales leadership to pursue my life's work, which this is now what we're going to be talking today about is the um, birthing of my life's work into the world. And I got to go on quite a journey to be able to be here in this conversation with you. And one of the things that I actually got to experience is what happens when you develop a leader from the top and how you address their consciousness and how it creates systemic change. And that led me to apply to grad school, to literally the most innovative university in the country, to measure and prove that the way that we develop leaders is needing to be updated from the Newtonian paradigm to the metaphysical nonlinear paradigm. And when I got into grad school with this specific thesis, I had the chance to meet a number of different, basically organizational psychologists, one by the name of Richard E. Boyatzis, and the other one was Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And Richard E. Boyatzis, it's funny, I reached out with him with my thesis of connecting consciousness to systemic change. And he basically told me that he already had proven what it is that I was going to go to school to study, which was completely mind-blowing. And I remember disorienting and discombobulating because I like really thought I was doing something revolutionary. And then he basically told me to go read his Magnus Opus before actually talking to him. So about a month before reaching out to him, he had just released his newest book called The Science of Change, how to create change from the individual, the dyad, to the team, to the organization, to the community, to the global processes. And this thing is a massive textbook. Like it is not an easy read like Dr. Benjamin Hardy's work is. Like those are like 4 or 5 hour, like really digestible books. This is not that. And one of the things that I actually got to learn from what's called intentional change theory, which Richard has spent the last 60 years developing. So this is not new information. It's just not being talked about until now because he's out researching it. And one of the things that I realized is that it just needed to be applied. And so one of the things that I learned from what's called ICT is that the first step of a change process is actually connecting to your ideal vision for yourself or a collective shared vision. And what it does is that aspirational identity or shared vision creates something called PEA, which stands for positive emotional attractor. That literally is like the fuel, like going to a gas station and fueling up to be able to keep going. And that is actually what sustains the change process because our bodies and our physiology and our nervous system are prone not to change. Change is inherently hard. Oftentimes it makes us struggle. That's why growth, it's like we love it, we hate it, right? It's got two sides of the same coin. But Cultural Catalyst was founded because Cultural Catalyst is both an ideal identity and an outcome in one sentence. And I'll give you an example. I was talking to a previous mentor of mine. She's like, "What are you up to?" And I was like, "Well, I just founded the Cultural Catalyst Network." And she was like, what is that? And then she took a step back and she was like, oh, I already answered my own question. You already said what it is, because cultural catalyst has already does that. So cultural catalyst is an identity. It's a collective shared vision for people who view themselves as cultural catalysts to be able to identify with each other, to be able to share a vision with each other, and to be able to support each other in actually actualizing their desire to catalyze culture.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. I love that. Okay, tell me then how you work with founders, because you work with founders who are usually already successful. But
Mhm.
what brings them to you? What is it that they're missing?
What brings them to me specifically? It's funny when you ask me that question, I immediately think back into one of my longest term clients and how I met her specifically. There was an alignment in mission specifically. We had alignment in mission that got us to start working together. And one of the things that I know that she tells me consistently is my determination is relentless.
Mhm.
And so when it comes to a leader who's established, or a leader who is actually making an impact and has impact as an actual metric in their business and not just a ROI, determination and relentless determination is really important when it comes to perseverance and overcoming the inevitable obstacles involved with really changing the fabric of our society and introducing and pioneering something new. So that's why those type of founders are generally drawn to me. They appreciate that specific personality trait within me.
Wow. So what about so this I'm really curious about, because with the internet and with so many people working from home, and a lot of people, like even like I take myself, I don't go, I retired from my job, my full-time job.
Yeah,
Now I have another job, which is this, but it's a passion. But I work from home.
yeah,
And so many people, I'm going to just talk mainly about women,
yeah.
work from home.
Mhm.
And it can be really isolating. So, can you tell us a little bit about leadership isolating?
Yeah, well, this is actually a conversation that's been coming up in a lot of the conversations that I've been having, but I'll just give you a specific example with one of my long-term clients is, when we sat down with her last year after her achieving a lifelong goal, actually, and she was looking at what was next, and we looked at her purpose and we updated her purpose statement, and then we looked at new objectives, like what is she was really aspiring for, and then actually set like actual metrics and like, was she asking enough of herself? Was it achievable? Will she enjoy doing it? Um, when we look at those specific questions, one of the things that I got to realize in working with her was that she had a desire for peers, like actual friends. And what I noticed with her was that she was primarily focused and surrounded by mentors, or excuse me, mentees,
Mhm.
contractors, employees, and previous friends from, previous cycles of relationship. There wasn't really anyone that was able to meet her in her desire to be a cultural catalyst, the vision of being a cultural catalyst, and meet her at her level of competence, which is another word for capacity, to be able to activate her, to be able to ask more of her, to be able to challenge her with love, to be able to call her forth into another level of greatness, and then to be able to help fuel that change effort. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And so I started seeing that with other high-level founders who had already achieved success. They're just surrounded by employees and contractors and mentees and
Yeah.
their peers. Uh, they're not surrounded by them at all. And part of it is like when you look at the masterminds and the networks that already exist, they're like either primarily just business networks, or like they're focused on business, or that they're like spiritual and consciousness. Because usually when you get up to a level of success, you have to do some level of inner work to get there. So like both of those sides of them are there, but there's nothing that's been really addressing their desire to be a cultural catalyst until now. And so
Mhm.
that aloneness is not just like a physiological or just like a human need. It's actually what the science talks about um, as what's called resonance. Like you need resonant peer relationships to be able to sustain and fuel your change efforts. And it was being shown directly in front of my face, which is actually why we created the Cultural Catalyst Network, was because they need peers. And I'm not talking mentors, people at the next step. I'm
Yes.
actually talking peers about where they want to go, to actually not just, to actually enjoy the rest of the journey, because that joy, that turn on, that pleasure, that actually fuels their transformation isn't just like, a feminine term to describe like a turned on woman. It's actually the intrinsic motivation. It's the fuel that science says is required to be able to sustain a change effort. So you guys and founders are humans too, and you deserve friends. And we're creating an environment right now where you actually have the ability to be around world changers just like you.
I love that. I love that because you spot on. Spot on because I look at a lot of the ladies that in several of the groups that I belong in and you can see it. You can definitely see it for sure. You mentioned that for people to get to the successful
Mhm.
part of being a founder, they
Yeah.
have to do the inner work, or you
Yeah,
think they've done the inner work. So what would that inner work
totally.
be? Just, briefly, what kind of inner work is it that people are needing? I mean, if somebody out there is wanting to be a founder and they
Yeah.
know, what is it? What's the inner work that needs to be done?
Well, it's funny. I was, contemplating this in my own personal journey to get where I am, and there was a depth of personal mastery that was required to be able to take something into the world and to be able to address the obstacles that come and be able to still persevere. And so, when we look at a founder who's achieved something that most people would never have set out to achieve, you also look at the metrics. Like the metrics of success are not high. So, like when it comes to like actually being a successful founder and actually being someone that can persevere through the challenges, like when you look at Dr. Benjamin Hardy's Scaling Science, for example, his newest book, and having a chance to meet him this past year and him review my thesis and him wanting to support what I was working on, when you actually look at setting something and making a goal and setting a vision that actually gives you life, something that helps you, it's called PEA. Again, it creates PEA within the body, and that can actually sustain your change efforts. What happens when you set a frame, so in this case, it's called a performance goal, but from Hardy's standpoint, it'd be like an impossible goal with an impossible timeline. And the purpose of it is to be able to help redefine who you are and to be able to simplify. What it does is it illuminates what's below your floor. And your floor is basically you're needing to raise your standards to be able to simplify and to be able to achieve the thing that gives you energy, to gives you life. And that's a whole matter of things that you have to let go. And the letting go is itself is a transformational process. Right? Like
Yes.
when we
Oh, it
look
is.
at what growth actually is from the spiritual teachers, it all comes down to letting go. And so to be able to actualize one's potential, it does require a letting go of self. It requires a letting go of what you view to be possible or not to be possible. It requires a letting go of what you thought you were capable or not. And, I believe, at least, the leaders that I work with, a deep development of faith that's required, especially when it comes to pioneering something new.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about using aliveness as a metric.
Yes.
So what did you mean by that?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I actually got a chance. I don't know if you got a chance to see the Alex Hermosi and the Tony Robbins interview from last week.
No, I didn't. No.
Okay.
No,
Well,
I
it was
didn't
like
see
all
it.
over my social media because I'm an entrepreneur and I follow entrepreneurs. And so I decided to watch it. And we actually got to see exactly what we're speaking in real time. So why is aliveness in a metric? Well, we got to see Hermosi and Tony actually coach him and realize that the goals that Hermosi was setting wasn't lighting him up, actually. It literally was creating him just looking kind of grumpy, like literally like no neutral face. And then Tony was able to connect him to a part of himself that literally lit him up. Like literally, he started smiling. Um, and one of the things that Tony also identified was that he thought happiness was impossible. And so when he was setting his
Wow.
goals for himself,
Yeah.
he was setting goals that would require him to struggle and they would be hard. And not because that was something to be avoided, but it's because Alex knew he could, right? And I think a lot of founders feel that way. It's like just because I can struggle and I can and make it through and I'm tough and I can persevere and I can get through anything, but that doesn't mean I need to. And what we got to actually see in that interview was Tony actually connected him to an impossible goal and timeline. Literally, he used the scaling science straight on the call and Alex lit up. His whole body lit up. And I mean smiling,
Mm.
his whole body, like his physiology, like got excited. He started smiling. And what does that mean, right? Well, when one of the things that Dr. Benjamin Hardy talks about in his book is making sure that we're scaling in the right direction, right? So we can scale in the direction of grind and struggle and be like, well, I can do it because I can get through anything. And we can do that. We can choose to do that. However, it doesn't actually make it sustainable, and it's actually depleting. And then oftentimes we get where we're
Mhm.
going and then we don't find what we're looking for when we're there, right? That's like the biggest disappointment you could possibly have. But when you choose a goal that actually lights you up inside, that's what we mean by turn on. It's like a light bulb. Okay.
Mhm.
What it does is it creates the intrinsic motivation instead of extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is what happens when you have external things that are motivating you.
Yes.
Intrinsic motivation is the internal motivation. And when you have something that's pulling you instead of you pushing you, that's actually what creates the change that's sustainable. And it actually makes the process enjoyable, not just the destination.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that, because I think that is one of the most important things. I don't know, we haven't finished our conversation, but I personally think that's probably going to be one of the most important things, or the most important thing
Yeah.
that our listeners are going to need to hear.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
was great. Thank you for that. I
Yeah, you're very
appreciate it.
welcome.
I want to talk a little bit about the differences in founders, because you talk a little bit, you talk about spiritual. If you're a spiritual founder,
Yeah.
then it's sometimes difficult to move into the business space.
Yes.
How do they do that? How do we connect that? Because you're helping people, but it is still a business. I think that
Yes.
would be the goal.
Hmm. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you're asking about how people who are in the spiritual space move into the business space, or founders who are leading with purpose.
Yeah, well, how are they, like, when I was researching you, I found, let me just read the question. That'll
Yes.
help. Many founders feel too conscious for business spaces and too business focused for spiritual ones.
Yeah.
How do you see this tension showing up?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean is like, working with that client and also seeing that in another one of the ladies that I support around me, an eight-figure founder, is that they are surrounded by employees and contractors. It's the exact same issue. And when the science says that they actually need resonant peers, right? The resonance means shared vision, shared compassion, and shared energy. Shared compassion, when you actually go deeper into what that metric actually means, it's shared competence. So even though I might have a similar vision as someone who also is a cultural catalyst and we can activate each other, I might have a completely different level of competence, right? Like I am a systems designer and a systems builder. Like I'm a strategist, for example. I'm a leader, I'm a speaker, right? I'm a coach, right? All these different things. And they might not be any of those things. They might be like in a totally different world and consider themselves a cultural catalyst. And so we're not able to understand each other basically because we have different levels of competence. And that's what we need is like this like aloneness that leaders are speaking to, and they might not even realize they have it. That's the thing, is like when we call it the unnamed ache, it's because they are like, well, I've done everything I was set out to do, and there's still a part of me that feels kind of empty inside, and I'm not quite sure what it's from or why it's there, but um that's because we've been listening to what it is that they're needing. And so um it hasn't existed until now, and that's the biggest problem. It's like, what does it mean when they're too conscious for business and too business for spiritual? Is because that competence piece isn't able to be met in the spiritual zones or just in the business zones. Because, for example, even just this past year we went to a conference that was like, full of women and like entrepreneurs, that was like all about scaling, and it was supposed to be fun and all this stuff, and like they didn't address like the cultural change side of anything. And they're like saying it's not about the money, but their linguistics are telling us it's about the money. And then they're addressing the inner work side that's needing to be developed to make the impact, but they're not integrating the cultural catalyst side of things. So one of the things that the reason why this hasn't been able to be solved until now is because no one's been addressing it. So what we're creating was literally created exactly for this issue, for the people who are listening to this and being like, yeah, you get me. I didn't even realize that was the problem, but you are 100%. I am not surrounded by peers, and there's a part of me that's dying inside because I need friends just like everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah. Why do founders assume growth requires sacrifice?
Yeah.
Sacrifice of joy, creativity, authenticity. Why do we think it has to be so hard?
Yeah. Well, hard. Let's look at the word hard, for example. Um, when I hear the word hard, I often associate that with the word like struggle, for example. And
Hmm.
I'm a student of the gene keys, for example, and I have the gene key of the warrior of light, which what that means is the shadow is struggle, and the gift is perseverance, and the city being honor. And the gene keys is a system to help you unlock your purpose within your genetics. So, and it's also a self-contemplation system. So we can just kind of look at these codes and
Hmm.
think about them and what it means for us. So one of the things that I noticed in my own life is I've had to address struggle at depth. Like there's a part of me that's constantly struggling or used to constantly struggle and deeply needs to be honored, and then it releases. And one of the things that I find with most people is that they are struggling in some way or some form, and they won't admit it. Exactly, these founders too. They are so good at getting it done, and they've gotten themselves so far, and they've broken the wind, and they've pioneered something new, and they've gotten somewhere that most people would never dream of being, and people look up to them being like, you did it. And at the same time, the way that they did it was still from a place of struggle. And why is this even relevant? Well, it's because struggle is actually something that's a genetically, like it's genetic. Like we have been programmed to struggle. That's how we've survived. And struggle is like fighting for something, basically. And struggle is either you're fighting someone else or you're fighting yourself, basically. And that's actually life-taking. It's not life-giving. And so
Hmm.
when we bring honor to how hard it is, and that's the thing, is like I do this with my clients all the time, that the honor, the struggle, the hardness, the challenge that was required to get them where they got themselves, that no one will ever understand except them, right? No one's ever going to get it except them, because none of them were in there with them doing it. That part of them needs to be deeply honored.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think most are not. Yeah. Yeah. So do you think we got a bunch of founders going on that are depressed?
Actually, it's funny. I went to Conscious Entrepreneurship Summit last year. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and have the blessing of having that be within basically scooter distance. And there was a famous psychiatrist that went on the stage who had studied entrepreneurs. And he showed this graph of the mental health of entrepreneurs. It was astonishingly terrible. There was a high percentage of them that were basically 1 to 2 degrees away from full-blown mental illness. And then most people are operating from a place that, when we look at the scale consciousness, would be either hyperactivity, right? Like stress, not happy and productive, not peak performance without stress. And then they actually took like a test. They had the whole room fill out like a test to see where you were going. And 80% of the room was under some level of mental duress. And only 20% of the room was in actual peak performance without stress. So this isn't a taboo topic. This isn't
No,
something that's even, it's not to be judged at all. Like there's nothing
no.
wrong with the people or whether, or the founders and it doesn't need to be changed either. Like it just needs to be accepted that this is the reality of, bringing something new into the world and, putting everything on the line in some circumstances to be able to do that. And it's a transformational process. It's a cauldron, literally. Like you go in to make something and then you turn into something else. And most people don't have the tools to actually consciously participate in that transformational process. So that's when we lose people, unfortunately. And that's why I believe the success rate isn't where it needs to be, because most people haven't developed the self-mastery that's required to really not just make something happen, but to actually let alone enjoy it.
Hmm.
That's enjoying it is like a completely revolutionary idea.
Yeah. So Jaclyn, let me ask you, how do you help people?
Yeah.
So yeah, so somebody feels that they don't know. They just feel they need some help. They come to you. What is it that you're doing to help people?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple different things that I've got going on at the moment. Number one is the Cultural Catalyst Network. We're actually bringing together these cultural catalysts to create peer resonance, to help them actualize their desire for cultural contribution and their personal evolution. And there's actually science behind why we're doing that specifically. And part of that is actually going to be my transformational coaching. So I've been an executive coach for nearly a decade now. And one of the reasons I actually founded Cultural Catalyst was because I was getting stuck in a results-oriented paradigm when my results were exponential. and actually beyond what the mind you could even perceive as possible. And so Cultural Catalyst was founded off of the idea of that each and every one of us who desires to be a cultural catalyst has a unique vision of what means to be a cultural catalyst. And my job is twofold. Number one is to help them see what they're not seeing and to help them let that go, to be able to help actualize that part of them. And then the second thing I'm doing is actually creating the infrastructure for that change process to actually be sustained and even enjoyable.
Wow. Yeah, there's if you're getting burnt out and you're not feeling your passion anymore, you've got to reach out to somebody
Yeah.
and get some help for sure, because when you get to that point, it's difficult to do it on your own.
Yeah.
And something's going to give.
Well, it's never meant to be on our own, and that's
No.
the problem. And that's what the science is telling us. The science is telling us is we actually need resonant peers to be able to go to the gas station and fill our tank with each other, literally.
Yes. Yes.
If we are burning out, then it's very likely, just like we saw in the Hermosi interview, is that he was choosing to drive him wasn't actually giving him life. It was draining him. That's what he wasn't
Yeah.
smiling. He was just
Yeah.
like in his mind, basically. And so when it comes to choosing an objective, when it comes to choosing a goal, when it comes to connecting to a vision and then actually going into resolve and making something happen, we need to make sure we actually choose something that lights us up, that actually makes us excited, that
Yes.
makes us passionate, that gives us life when we talk about it. Because if it doesn't give us life when we talk about it, we are sure as hell not going to be able to overcome the obstacles that are inevitable in the process of actualizing it. That is literally what is causing burnout. We have to have a vision that creates PEA, again, positive emotional attractor, because PEA doesn't just create positivity. It puts your body into rest and digest. It
Hmm.
opens up your neural networks to be able to see collaboration and new ideas and resource sharing in there. So this idea, if you are grinding and you are not connected to your vision, then you are likely scaling in the wrong direction right now.
Right. What do you think about what advice could you give somebody who's sort of sitting, maybe they're at a 9 to 5, they're
Oh,
not
wow.
happy, and they want to, but they got this thought, they've got a vision.
Yeah.
There's something they know they're here for, they want to do it, but they've got a toe in and a foot in their job. And
Yep. Got
what
it.
do you suggest?
Commit or don't commit. And I'll
Ooh,
give you a specific example. So a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago at this point, I was sitting in a party with an 8-figure founder. And she asked me a question. She was like, how would you make this decision? And I was like, okay, so let's look at this from the scaling science. Let's look at this from the 10, you're going to 10x within 3 years. And then she looks at me and she was like, okay, that means I'd have to sell one of my businesses, right? And then she went into all this resistance about selling her business because what she's built, taken everything she's had to get where she is, and she's
yes.
finally it's easy for the first time. However,
Yeah.
one of the things that was so interesting to hear was that she was actually bored too. So that was the shadow side of once you've set out to achieve it and you've achieved it, and then there's an aspect of, am I still growing or am I dying? Like that's the entropy piece that we briefly talked about. So when it comes to and then right before she left, right? Why is this relevant to your audience and who you're speaking to right now? When she left, once we finished the conversation and we addressed what needed to be addressed, I looked at her, I was like, so if you're going to scale, I either need you to commit or not commit. And then she looked at me and she's like, we're already scaling. And I was like, oh yeah, she's already scaling 3x. But when you scale 10x within 3 years or faster, that's a whole different paradigm. So, and then I retracted and I said, okay, so I either need you to commit to 10xing in 3 years or not commit to 10xing in 3 years. And it cannot be a decision that you make with your COO. It needs to be a decision that you make with yourself.
Right.
Okay. And then later I see her COO now is 10xing, right? And they're going after that job, but because that founder decided to commit. And the thing with commitment is we cannot force commitment. One of the things that, I think our culture makes a mistake in is that since we say we commit to something, we have to stay committed. But that's where we get attached to things that might drain us. So sometimes we
Hmm.
actually have to let go of our commitment to something to actually commit to it. So people who are either whether they're founders, employees, contractors, if you're not fully in, you're fully out. Like 99% does not count as commitment, and it's actually bad luck. So
Yeah.
you either need to commit or you need to get out. It's really that simple. And yes, that is going to be a challenging process that requires you to be honest with yourself. But by giving yourself that choice, then you have the autonomy to actually choose which direction you want to go and apply all of your energy, 100% of your commitment, and not just 99%.
You are so right. I'm going to tell you a really brief story about me. So I was in sales for 34 years, and about 10, 12 years in, I was also doing a bunch of public speaking. I was going into schools and training all sorts of people. Anyway, that was something else I was doing. And I did that for 8 years, and I loved it. And that's where my passion was.
Hmm.
But I was a single mom and I had 3 kids that I needed to
Yeah.
feed, and a mortgage and a car payment. And the speaking was filling me up, but it wasn't bringing me anywhere near the income that I needed.
Yeah.
And so I knew I had one foot in and one foot out, and I had to make a decision. And I
Yep.
made the decision to stop the speaking because I have responsibilities
Yep.
and this is what I need to do. But I
Yep.
always knew in the back of my head, I'd go back to it. And here I am. And
Here you
I'm
are.
actually putting on our March 8th, where I'm actually putting on our first International Women's Conference for
Wow.
speakers.
Look at
So,
that.
but it was in the vault.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
knew I had to because, yeah. So I totally get you. Whatever it is you have to do, if you don't commit to one or the other, you're not doing either of them.
Yeah. And I also just want to offer a third path of just like letting it go and giving it to a higher power.
Yes.
Right. And when we give our commitment to a higher power, that actually helps us get clarity on what it is that we need to commit to.
Yes.
So it takes
Yes.
the pressure off of us from being like, we need to figure it out to actually know what it's actually going to be obviously true. I just need to let myself be shown.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. What a great conversation. I just appreciate it, Jaclyn, so much. I just want to let everyone know that we are going to have Jaclyn's information, links to find her in the show notes. So
Mhm.
if you're feeling like you need to speak to her, she's very knowledgeable, as you can see, and she's kind, and I get inspired by her just listening to her. So I would not hesitate at all to encourage you to reach out to her if you're feeling, I need to get some advice or I need some help. And yeah, and I'm tired of being isolated as well. I could just go on and on and on, but we can't. But maybe you can come back again one day
Yeah,
and we
definitely.
can chat some more. So in closing, Jaclyn, what would you like to say to the audience that's listening?
Yeah, so the one thing that I want to make sure that I walk away with this from this audience with is making sure that if there are people who identify as a cultural catalyst within your specific network, I would love to invite you to our masterclass where we'll actually be sharing with you the science behind how to become a cultural catalyst and how to make an exponential contribution as a cultural catalyst. So you can actually come join us every Saturday. We hold a masterclass at culturalcontribution.com. We'd love to have you, and we get to actually have you go through an actual transformational experience on the call with us as a cultural catalyst to be able to experience in real time, to be able to shift you from where you are to where you want to be as a cultural catalyst.
That is amazing. So you'll have that link for people
Yeah.
to, that's amazing. Oh, I just pulled my ear. I got so excited. I just ripped out my earphone.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Jaclyn. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing that. So if you all caught that, she's going to have that information in the show notes for you.
Mhm.
So take advantage of that. Even, even just, yeah, just take advantage of that. Well, Jaclyn, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I have learned so much, and I'm positive our audience has learned from you as well. And yeah, I just really appreciate you doing this. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, okay, everybody. That's the end, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.